He had it all. 35 years, 3 children, grandchildren's laughter filling his home. A wife who'd stood by him through every struggle, every late night, every sacrifice. They'd built something real, something that was supposed to last forever. But forever shattered in a Manhattan office when a young assistant made him feel alive again. One kiss. One choice. One moment of weakness that destroyed decades of loyalty. Now he sits alone in an empty apartment, watching his family celebrate without him, knowing his grandchildren will grow up barely knowing his name. This is the story of how one man traded everything he loved for something he thought he wanted and learned too late that some mistakes can never be undone. Robert Callahan had built his life the way his father taught him, brick by brick, with calloused hands and an unshakable work ethic. At 62 years old, he owned Callahan and Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm occupying the 7th floor of a building on West 47th Street in Manhattan. The office wasn't glamorous, but it was solid, profitable, and respected. Through the large windows, you could see the constant motion of midtown yellow cabs honking, business people rushing with coffee cups, steam rising from subway gratings even in September. Margaret had been there from the beginning. They'd met in 1988 at a community college in Queens, both working part-time jobs while studying business. She was a cashier at a grocery store on Northern Boulevard. He delivered newspapers at 4 in the morning before classes. Their first date was coffee at a diner on Steinway Street, nothing fancy, just two kids with big dreams and empty wallets. She wore a simple blue dress that she'd sewn herself, and he remembered thinking she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. They married in 1990 in a small ceremony at St. Sebastian's Church in Woodside. Margaret's parents had immigrated from Ireland in the 70s, and his family had been in Queens for 3 generations. The reception was held in the church basement with folding tables, homemade food, and a borrowed stereo playing Frank Sinatra. They honeymooned for 2 days in the Catskills because that's all they could afford. The early years were hard. Robert worked 60-hour weeks building his client base while Margaret managed their tiny apartment in Astoria and later their first real home, a narrow 2-story house in Bayside they bought in 1995. She kept the books for his growing business, answered phones, scheduled appointments, all while pregnant with their first child. Danny was born in 1993, then Sarah in 1996, and finally Michael in 1999. Margaret never complained. When Robert came home at 9 or 10 at night, she had dinner waiting. When tax season meant he'd sleep at the office on a cot, she handled everything: kids' homework, doctor appointments, school conferences, birthday parties. She was the foundation he built his empire on, though he rarely said it out loud. By 2023, the kids were grown. Danny was 30, working as a civil engineer in Boston with a wife and 2 young daughters. Sarah was 27, a high school teacher in New Jersey, married to a good man who coached soccer. Michael, at 24, had just finished graduate school and was starting a position at a nonprofit in Brooklyn. The house in Bayside had long been paid off, and 2 years ago, Robert and Margaret had moved to a comfortable condo in Forest Hills with a view of the park. They'd done it. They'd raised good kids, built a stable life, and reached the age where they could finally relax. Margaret talked about traveling Ireland to see her cousins, maybe Italy in the spring. She'd started taking watercolor classes on Tuesday evenings at the community center and had joined a book club with other women her age. She was 59, her hair more silver than brown now, but Robert thought she'd aged gracefully. She still had that same gentle smile from the diner in Queens 35 years ago. But somewhere in the comfortable rhythm of their life, Robert had stopped seeing her. It wasn't intentional. It happened slowly, like snow accumulating on a roof unnoticed until the weight becomes dangerous. He still kissed her goodbye in the mornings, still asked about her day over dinner, still held her hand during movies. But the conversations had become routine. The passion had faded into companionship. And companionship, though valuable, doesn't make a man's heart race anymore. That's when Jennifer Chen entered the picture. She was hired in March 2023 as Robert's executive assistant. The previous assistant, Mrs. Kowalski, had retired after 15 years, and the firm needed someone sharp, organized, and capable of handling the increasing workload. Jennifer was 28, a recent MBA graduate from Baruch College, ambitious and polished. She wore tailored suits and heels that clicked confidently across the office floors. Her resume was impressive internships at major firms, fluent in Mandarin and English, tech-savvy in ways that made Robert feel ancient. At first, it was purely professional. Jennifer reorganized his chaotic filing system, streamlined his schedule, and managed clients with remarkable efficiency. She anticipated his needs before he articulated them. She stayed late without being asked, worked weekends during busy periods, and never seemed overwhelmed by the pressure. "Your wife must appreciate having such a dedicated husband," Jennifer said one evening in May, around 7:30, as they finished reviewing quarterly reports. The office was empty, cleaning crew vacuuming in the distance. Robert looked up from his computer. "She's used to it by now. 35 years, she knows the drill." Jennifer smiled. 35 years. That's incredible. You don't see that anymore. Different generation, Robert said, returning to his spreadsheet. But he felt something, a small flicker of pride mixed with something else he couldn't quite name. The conversations became longer. Jennifer would ask about his weekend, about his kids, about how he'd built the business from nothing. She listened with genuine interest, her dark eyes focused entirely on him when he spoke. It felt good to be heard, to be seen as interesting rather than just familiar. By July, they were having lunch together regularly. Just the two of them, at a quiet Italian place on 9th Avenue where nobody from the office went. They talked about business mostly, but also about life, ambitions, frustrations. Jennifer was working on her CPA certification and asked Robert for advice. He found himself mentoring her, enjoying the role of teacher, the way she looked at him with admiration. Margaret noticed he was coming home later, but she didn't question it. She trusted him. After 35 years, why wouldn't she? In August, during a late evening at the office, Jennifer brought in Thai food, Robert's favorite, though he didn't remember telling her that. They ate at his desk, papers pushed aside, talking about a difficult client. The conversation drifted to personal territory. "Do you ever feel like life is passing you by?" Jennifer asked suddenly, setting down her chopsticks. "Like you've done everything right but you're not happy?" Robert paused. The question caught him off guard because he'd been thinking the same thing for months. Sometimes, he admitted. "But that's just part of getting older, I think. You settle into routine." "But should you have to settle?" Jennifer's voice was soft, almost sad. "My parents settled. They're miserable. They stay together because it's easier than being alone, but there's no joy. I don't want that life." Robert felt his chest tighten. "It's not that simple when you've built a whole life together. You can't just—" "I know," Jennifer interrupted gently. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply. Your situation is different. You and Margaret have something real." But the seed was planted. That night, driving home to Forest Hills in his Lexus, Robert felt restless. He thought about Jennifer's question, "Are you happy?" When was the last time he'd felt truly alive, not just content but excited about life? He couldn't remember. He came home to find Margaret asleep on the couch, reading glasses still on, a library book about Tuscany open on her lap. The television played quietly some British baking show she liked. He looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a wave of complicated emotions. Gratitude, yes. Affection, certainly. But also a creeping sense of loss, not of her, but of himself, of the man he used to be before mortgages and tuition, payments and responsibilities. He didn't wake her. He went upstairs to the bedroom, lay in the dark, and stared at the ceiling. September arrived with cooler weather and changing leaves in Forest Park. The firm was entering its busiest season, year-end planning for corporate clients, tax strategy sessions, endless meetings. Robert found himself relying more heavily on Jennifer, and she rose to every challenge. They were a perfect team professionally. But the line between professional and personal had begun to blur in ways Robert knew were dangerous, but couldn't seem to stop. One Friday evening, after everyone else had left, Jennifer came into his office with a bottle of wine. "We survived another brutal week," she said with a tired smile. "I thought we deserved a celebration." Robert knew he should say no. He knew he should make an excuse, grab his coat, and go home to his wife. But he didn't. He said yes. They drank the wine, talked for hours, and when Jennifer stood to leave, she leaned down and kissed him. It wasn't a long kiss. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. But it changed everything. Robert didn't sleep that night. He lay beside Margaret, listening to her steady breathing, feeling the weight of what had happened pressing down on his chest like a physical thing. The kiss replayed in his mind, Jennifer's lips soft against his, the brief moment before he'd pulled away, the look in her eyes that said she'd been wanting this for months. He'd pulled away. That mattered, didn't it? He'd said, "Jennifer, we can't," and she'd nodded, apologized, gathered her things and left. Nothing more had happened. One mistake, one moment of weakness, easily corrected. Except he couldn't stop thinking about it. Saturday morning, Margaret made pancakes, the same recipe she'd been using for 30 years, the kitchen filled with the smell of butter and vanilla. She wore her old NYU sweatshirt and had her silver hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked comfortable, familiar, safe. "You seemed restless last night," she said, sliding a plate in front of him. "Everything okay at work?" "Just the usual end-of-quarter stress," Robert lied, drowning his pancakes in syrup. "Nothing serious." She sat across from him with her coffee, reading the New York Times on her iPad, a birthday gift from the kids last year. "Sarah called yesterday. She wants us to come to New Jersey next weekend. Emily's school is doing a fall festival." Emily was their granddaughter, 7 years old, gap-toothed and obsessed with gymnastics. Robert loved her fiercely, the way grandparents do, with none of the exhaustion of raising children, only the joy of spoiling them. "Sure," he said. "That sounds nice." But as Margaret talked about the festival, about Sarah's new principal being difficult, about the book club's upcoming trip to the Strand bookstore, Robert felt disconnected. He was physically present but mentally elsewhere, still feeling Jennifer's lips, still hearing her voice. "Do you ever feel like life is passing you by?" He spent the weekend doing yard work, fixing a leaking faucet, taking Margaret to her favorite Italian restaurant in Rego Park. He was attentive, affectionate even. He told himself this was enough, that he was lucky, that millions of men would kill for his life, good health, financial security, a devoted wife, successful kids. But Monday morning, when he walked into the office and saw Jennifer at her desk, his heart jumped in a way it hadn't in decades. She looked up, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. She wore a navy dress and pearl earrings, professional and proper, but Robert saw her differently now. "Morning," she said carefully. "Your 9 o'clock is waiting in the conference room." "Thank you," Robert replied, and walked past her desk, forcing himself not to look back. They didn't speak about Friday night. They maintained professionalism, emails, memos, client meetings. But the tension was electric. Every time Jennifer entered his office, every time their hands accidentally touched passing documents, Robert felt it. 2 weeks passed. Robert threw himself into work, staying late but keeping his door open, never being alone with Jennifer. He called Margaret more during the day, made plans for dinner, suggested they book that trip to Ireland she'd been talking about. "Really?" Margaret's voice brightened on the phone. "You mean it? You take 2 weeks off?" "Sure," Robert said, though the thought of being away from the office, away from Jennifer, made him anxious. "You've been patient with my schedule for years. You deserve it." Margaret was thrilled. She immediately started researching flights, hotels, touring companies. She bought travel guides and watched YouTube videos about Dublin and the cliffs of Moher. Her excitement should have made Robert happy, but instead, it filled him with guilt. He was trying to fix something that wasn't broken. Margaret wasn't the problem, he was. In mid-October, the firm hosted a client appreciation event at a restaurant in Tribeca, one of those trendy places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, serving small plates that cost $30 each. Robert attended these events quarterly, usually bringing Margaret. But this time, he told her it was just for staff and clients, too boring for spouses. He lied. And Margaret, trusting as always, believed him. Jennifer wore a black cocktail dress that night. She mingled with clients, charming them effortlessly, laughing at their jokes, remembering their kids' names. Robert watched her from across the room, nursing a scotch, feeling like a teenager with a crush. Several clients commented on how lucky he was to have such a capable assistant. One older gentleman, Frank Delaney, who'd been with the firm for 20 years, pulled Robert aside. "She's sharp, that one," Frank said, nodding toward Jennifer. "But be careful, Bobby. I've seen this movie before. Don't be stupid." Robert stiffened. "I don't know what you're implying, Frank, but I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. I've been married 43 years. I know what stupid looks like." Frank clapped him on the shoulder and walked away. The event ended around 10. Robert offered to share a cab with Jennifer since they were both heading uptown. In the back seat, the leather seats cold, the driver playing soft jazz, Jennifer turned to him. "Robert, we need to talk about what happened." "There's nothing to talk about," he said, staring out the window at the passing lights. "It was a mistake. We both know it." "Was it?" Her voice was quiet but direct. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you. And I don't think you've stopped thinking about me either." Robert's jaw clenched. "Jennifer, I'm married. I have grandchildren. I'm not asking you to run away with me. I'm just saying, what we have is real. This connection is real. And pretending it's not is making us both miserable." The cab stopped at a red light on Park Avenue. Robert could see the lit windows of apartment buildings, each one a life, a family, a story. He thought about Margaret at home, probably asleep by now, her watercolor supplies spread across the dining room table, CNN playing softly in the background. "I love my wife," he said finally. "I know you do. But do you still feel alive with her? Or is it just comfortable?" The light turned green. The cab lurched forward. And Robert didn't answer because the truth was too terrible to say aloud. They rode the rest of the way in silence. When the cab stopped at Jennifer's apartment building in Murray Hill, she paused before getting out. "I'm not trying to ruin your life, Robert. I'm really not. But we both deserve to be happy. Think about it." She kissed him on the cheek quick, soft, and disappeared into the building. Robert continued home to Forest Hills. Margaret was indeed asleep, the television still on, her iPad on the nightstand showing her Ireland itinerary. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching her sleep, feeling like the worst person in the world. Over the next month, Robert's internal war intensified. He tried to recommit to his marriage. He took Margaret to Broadway shows, nice restaurants, weekend trips to the Hudson Valley to see fall foliage. He made love to her for the first time in months, and she responded with surprise and tenderness, asking afterward if everything was okay. "Everything's fine," he lied, holding her close. I love you. I don't say it enough." "I love you too," she whispered, her head on his chest. "I know work has been crazy. But we're okay. We've always been okay." But at the office, the pull toward Jennifer grew stronger. They started having lunch again, then coffee in the mornings, then late dinners after work under the guise of business meetings. They talked about everything: her childhood in Flushing, his struggles building the firm, their fears and dreams. With Jennifer, Robert felt seen in ways he hadn't in years. She asked his opinion on things beyond household logistics. She challenged his ideas, debated with him, made him think. And she touched him small gestures at first. A hand on his arm during conversation. Fingers brushing against his when passing papers. Each touch was electric, forbidden, addictive. In early November, they crossed the line. It was a Wednesday evening, raining hard, the kind of cold autumn rain that makes Manhattan streets smell like wet concrete and exhaust. Everyone else had left the office. Robert and Jennifer were reviewing a presentation for a new client pitch. They sat close together at the conference table, laptop between them, her shoulder touching his. "You have a natural gift for this," Jennifer said, scrolling through slides. "You should teach. You'd be amazing at it." "I'm too old to start a new career," Robert said with a self-deprecating laugh. "You're not old. You're distinguished." She turned to face him, her dark eyes serious. "You're one of the most intelligent, passionate men I've ever met. Your wife is lucky to have you." "I don't know about that." "I do." Her hand moved to his face, gentle, deliberate. "I see you, Robert. Really see you." He should have pulled away. He should have stood up, made an excuse, gone home. But he didn't. He kissed her. And this time he didn't stop. They made love in his office, rain drumming against the windows, the city lights blurred through wet glass. It was passionate, urgent, and when it was over, Robert felt two overwhelming emotions simultaneously: exhilaration and crushing shame. He arrived home at midnight. Margaret was awake, worried, pacing in the living room. "Robert, where have you been?" "I called 3 times. My phone died," he said, the lie coming easily now. "We had a crisis with the Henderson account." "I'm sorry. I should have used the office phone to call." Margaret's worry melted into relief. She hugged him. "I was imagining terrible things. You're soaking wet. Go shower. I'll heat up some dinner." As Robert stood in the shower, hot water washing over him, he made a decision. This couldn't continue. He'd made a terrible mistake, but it was fixable. He'd end things with Jennifer immediately, transfer her to a different department, or help her find a position at another firm. He'd recommit to Margaret, take her to Ireland, be the husband she deserved. But when he saw Jennifer the next morning, all his resolve evaporated. She smiled at him, that secret smile, and he knew he was lost. He couldn't give her up. He didn't want to. The affair continued through November and into December. They were careful, different hotels, never the same restaurant twice, always paying cash. Robert created elaborate excuses for Margaret: client emergencies, networking events, late-night crisis meetings. She believed every word because after 35 years, why wouldn't she? The guilt ate at him constantly. He'd wake at 3 in the morning, Margaret sleeping beside him, and feel like he was drowning. But during the day with Jennifer, he felt more alive than he had in decades. She made him laugh. She challenged him. She wanted him with an intensity that made him feel young again. On December 15th, at a hotel in Midtown, lying in bed beside Jennifer, Robert said the words that would destroy everything. "I love you." Jennifer turned to him, her eyes shining. "I love you too. What are we going to do?" And Robert, in a moment of insanity that would haunt him forever, said, "I'll tell Margaret. After the holidays. I'll tell her everything." Christmas 2023 was the last time Robert's family would be whole. They gathered at the Forest Hills condo. Danny and his family drove down from Boston. Sarah and her husband came from New Jersey. Michael arrived from Brooklyn. The place was crowded with bodies, noise, wrapping paper, the smell of Margaret's roasted turkey filling every room. The grandchildren, Emily and little Grace, who was only 3, ran through the apartment wearing the new pajamas Margaret had bought them. Robert played his role perfectly. He smiled for photos, carved the turkey, told stories about past Christmases when the kids were young. He held Margaret's hand during Grace, kissed her cheek when she brought out her famous apple pie, acted like the devoted husband he'd been for 35 years. But inside he was hollow. Every laugh felt forced. Every hug felt like betrayal. Because he knew what was coming in January, knew he was about to detonate a bomb that would obliterate all of this. Danny pulled him aside in the kitchen while everyone else watched It's a Wonderful Life in the living room. "Dad, you okay? You seem distant." "Just tired," Robert said, loading dishes into the dishwasher. "Busy year at work." "When isn't it busy?" Danny laughed, then grew serious. "Hey, I wanted to say thanks. For everything. For working those crazy hours all those years so we could have good lives. I don't think I appreciated it enough when I was younger." Robert felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "You don't have to thank me. That's what parents do." "I know, but still. You and Mom, your relationship goals, man. 35 years and you still look at her like you did in those old wedding photos. That's rare." Danny clapped his shoulder. "Grace and Emily are lucky to have grandparents who model what real commitment looks like." Robert couldn't respond. He nodded, turned away, pretended to focus on the dishes. If Danny had looked closer, he might have seen the tears Robert was fighting to hold back. That night, after everyone had left, Margaret fell asleep with her head on Robert's shoulder on the couch. Christmas tree lights twinkling in the corner, she looked peaceful, happy. Completely unaware that her husband was planning to destroy her world, Robert didn't sleep. He sat there until dawn, watching her breathe, memorizing every detail of her face, knowing that in a few weeks, she'd look at him with hatred instead of love. January arrived with bitter cold and dirty snow piled on New York sidewalks. Robert had decided to tell Margaret on January 10th, a Wednesday. He'd rehearsed the speech 100 times. He'd even drafted it on his computer at work, trying to find words that would somehow make this less devastating. There were no such words. Jennifer was patient. She never pressured him, never gave ultimatums. She simply waited, trusting that he'd follow through. They'd started looking at apartments together during lunch breaks, one-bedrooms in Murray Hill or the Upper East Side, imagining a life together. Jennifer talked about having children. At 28, she still had time. Robert would be an older father, but not impossibly so. The idea terrified and excited him simultaneously. On January 8th, 2 days before the planned confession, Sarah called. "Dad, can you come to New Jersey this weekend? I need to talk to you and Mom about something important." "Is everything okay?" Robert felt immediate panic. "Are you sick? Is it Tom?" "No, nothing like that. It's good news, actually. But I want to tell you both in person." That Saturday, Robert and Margaret drove to Sarah's house in Montclair. The neighborhood was lovely, tree-lined streets, Victorian houses, families walking dogs. Tom greeted them at the door, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Sarah was in the kitchen, and when Robert saw her face, he knew immediately. The glow, the barely contained excitement. "We're pregnant," she announced, and Margaret screamed with joy, hugging her daughter, crying happy tears. Robert felt the world tilt. He hugged Sarah, congratulated Tom, said all the right things. But his mind was racing. Sarah was 27, same age as Jennifer. His daughter was having a baby. His third grandchild. And he was planning to abandon the family in for days. On the drive home, Margaret was euphoric, planning baby showers, talking about nursery colors, asking if they should look for a bigger place so they could have the grandchildren visit more often. 3 grandchildren, she said, squeezing Robert's hand. "Can you believe it? We're so blessed, Robert." So blessed. Robert couldn't do it. He couldn't tell her on Wednesday. He'd wait until after Sarah's first trimester was safe, after the initial excitement died down. February maybe or March. But the delay felt suffocating. He was living a double life, and the strain was showing. He became irritable, snapping at Margaret over small things: dinner being late, the thermostat setting, noise from her watercolor videos. Things that had never bothered him before now felt unbearable. Margaret noticed. "Robert, what's wrong? You've been so tense lately. Is something bothering you?" "Nothing's wrong. I'm just stressed about work." "Maybe you should see Dr. Patterson. Get a checkup. Make sure everything's." "I said I'm fine." He'd never yelled at her like that before. The shock on her face made him immediately apologize, but the damage was done. A crack had formed. At work, Jennifer was growing frustrated. "You said after the holidays." "It's been 3 weeks." "I know. I just need more time." "Sarah's pregnant, the families, there will always be something, Robert. A birthday, a holiday, a pregnancy. If you wait for the perfect moment, it'll never happen." She was right, and he knew it. But he was paralyzed, caught between 2 lives, unable to commit fully to either. In late January, Michael stopped by the office unexpectedly. He'd never done that before. The kids rarely visited their father's workplace. Robert felt a spike of fear. Did he know something? "Hey Dad, got a minute?" They went to a coffee shop across the street. Michael looked uncomfortable, stirring his latte repeatedly without drinking. "What's wrong?" Robert asked. "I need some advice. About relationships." Michael took a breath. "I've been seeing someone. It's getting serious. And I'm thinking about proposing, but I'm scared. What if I'm not ready? What if I mess it up?" Robert felt like a hypocrite. Here was his youngest son, 24 years old, asking for wisdom about commitment from a man who was destroying his own marriage. "What makes you think you'd mess it up?" Robert asked carefully. "I don't know. I look at you and Mom, and it seems so solid. 35 years. But what if I can't do that? What if I get 10 years in and realize I made a mistake? Then you'd be human," Robert heard himself say. "Marriage is hard, Michael. It's not the fairy tale people pretend it is. You change. Your partner changes. Sometimes you grow together. Sometimes you grow apart." Michael frowned. "Are you and Mom okay?" "Of course," Robert lied automatically. "Why would you ask that?" "I don't know. You just sounded." "Never mind. So you think I should propose?" "I think you should follow your heart. But also use your head. Make sure this person is someone you respect, not just someone you're infatuated with. Infatuation fades. Respect doesn't." The irony wasn't lost on Robert. He was giving advice he couldn't follow himself. Michael proposed to his girlfriend, Elena, in early February. She said yes. The family was overjoyed. Another celebration, another milestone. Margaret started planning an engagement party for March. And Robert kept postponing his confession. February passed. Then March. Jennifer's patience was wearing thin. "I feel like you're stringing me along," she said one evening in April in a hotel room in Chelsea. They'd just made love, but the afterglow was tainted by tension. "I'm not. I promise. You just keep finding excuses." Sarah's pregnancy. Michael's engagement. What's next? You'll wait for the baby to be born. For Michael's wedding. There's always going to be something, Robert. I know that. Then do it. Or admit you're never going to leave her and let me move on with my life. The ultimatum hung in the air. Robert felt panic rising. He couldn't lose Jennifer. But he couldn't imagine actually telling Margaret the truth either. "Give me until June," he said. After Michael's engagement party. "I promise, Jennifer. June 1st. I'll tell her everything." Jennifer studied his face, then nodded slowly. June 1st. That's your deadline. If you don't tell her by then, we're done. Robert agreed, and the timeline was set. 3 months. Then his real life could begin. But in late April, everything accelerated in a way Robert couldn't control. He'd been careless. A receipt from a hotel in his coat pocket that Margaret found doing laundry. Unusual charges on the credit card statement. Late nights that didn't match up with any client emergencies. Small inconsistencies that alone meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. Margaret wasn't stupid. After 35 years, she knew her husband. And somewhere deep down, in a place she'd been suppressing for months, she knew something was wrong. On April 26th, a Friday evening, Robert came home to find Margaret sitting at the dining room table, his laptop open in front of her. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. "Who is Jennifer Chen?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Robert's blood turned to ice. "She's my assistant. You know that. I know what you've told me. But these emails..." She turned the laptop to face him. "These are not professional emails, Robert." He'd been sloppy. He'd forgotten to log out, forgotten that Margaret had access to his computer. The emails were all there, months of them, increasingly intimate, declarations of love, arrangements for meetings. "Margaret, I can explain. Are you having an affair?" She stood up, her whole body trembling. "Answer me. Are you having an affair with your 28-year-old assistant?" The moment Robert had been dreading for months had arrived, but not on his terms, not with his carefully prepared speech. It was messy, sudden, brutal. "Yes," he said quietly. Margaret's face crumpled. She let out a sound like she'd been physically struck. "How long?" "Since November." "November?" "We went to Michael's graduation in November. We celebrated Thanksgiving. She couldn't finish." She was crying now, hard sobs that shook her entire body. Robert moved toward her, instinct to comfort, but she backed away. Don't you dare touch me." Her voice was raw. "How could you?" 35 years, Robert. 35 years I've stood by you. I gave up my career to support yours. I raised your children. I've been faithful, devoted, patient with your long hours, your obsession with work. And this is how you repay me? Margaret, please, is it serious? Or is she just some midlife crisis? Robert knew the truth would destroy her, but lying now seemed even crueler. "I love her. I'm sorry, Margaret. I didn't plan this. It just happened." "It just happened," Margaret repeated bitterly. 35 years of marriage just happened to end because a pretty young girl paid attention to you. Is that it? You're leaving me for her? Yes. The word hung between them like a death sentence. Margaret stared at him, and Robert saw something break in her eyes, not just heartbreak, but the complete shattering of her entire worldview. "Get out," she said flatly. "Margaret, get out." She screamed it this time, her face red, tears streaming. "Get out of this house. Get out of my life. I never want to see you again." Robert packed a bag. He called Jennifer from his car, told her what happened. She came to meet him at the hotel where he'd checked in, held him while he cried, told him it would be okay, that they could build a new life together. But as Robert lay awake that night, Jennifer sleeping beside him, he couldn't shake the image of Margaret's face, the devastation, the betrayal, the complete destruction of trust he'd spent 35 years building. And he knew, deep in his gut, that nothing would ever be okay again. The news spread through the family like wildfire. Margaret told Sarah first, the next morning, her voice hollow over the phone. Sarah immediately called Danny, who called Michael. Within 6 hours, all 3 of Robert's children knew their father had abandoned their mother for his assistant. Robert's phone exploded with messages. First came Sarah's text, "How could you do this to her, to us?" Then Danny called, but Robert couldn't answer. He listened to the voicemail later. "Dad, what the hell? Mom is destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. Call me back. We need to talk about this." Michael's message was shortest, "I don't want to hear from you right now." Robert sat in the hotel room, Jennifer beside him, and felt his entire life collapsing. He tried calling his children back, but none of them answered. He left voicemails, sent texts, tried to explain, nothing. Jennifer tried to comfort him. "They're angry. Give them time. They'll come around when they see you're happy." But Robert wasn't happy. He was terrified. The reality of what he'd done was sinking in, and it was so much worse than he'd imagined. On Sunday, Danny drove down from Boston. He didn't go to the hotel. He went to the Forest Hills condo, where his mother was still in her pajamas, eyes swollen from crying, the house dark and silent. He held her while she sobbed, listened to her broken voice recount 35 years of marriage that had apparently meant nothing. "I wasn't enough," Margaret kept saying. "After everything, I wasn't enough." "Mom, this isn't about you," Danny said, fury in his voice. "This is about him. About his selfishness. You gave him everything." Sarah arrived with Tom, bringing groceries because Margaret hadn't eaten in 2 days. Michael came from Brooklyn, walking through the door with the same devastated look they all wore. The 4 of them, Margaret and her 3 children, sat in the living room where they'd celebrated Christmas just 4 months earlier and tried to make sense of the senseless. "What do we do?" Sarah asked. "Legally, I mean." "Mom, you need a lawyer." Margaret nodded numbly. She'd spent Saturday calling her sisters in Ireland, crying on the phone, hearing their fury on her behalf. Her book club friends were rallying around her. Her whole community was shocked the Callahans had been the model couple, the ones everyone envied. "I trusted him completely," Margaret whispered. "I never even questioned it. All those late nights I thought he was working. I'm such an idiot." "You're not an idiot," Michael said fiercely. "You're someone who loved her husband and believed in her marriage. He's the one who betrayed that." Robert tried to visit on Monday. He called ahead, told Margaret he was coming to talk, to explain. She told him not to come. He came anyway. When he knocked on the door of the condo he'd lived in for 2 years, the house he'd paid for, Danny opened it. His oldest son, who'd always looked up to him, stood in the doorway with arms crossed and eyes cold. "She doesn't want to see you." "Danny, I need to explain." "Explain what?" "That you threw away 35 years for someone younger? That you humiliated Mom? That you've destroyed this family?" Danny's voice was shaking. "I brought my daughters here for Christmas. We took pictures. And the whole time you were cheating. You were lying to all of us. I never meant to hurt anyone. But you did. You hurt everyone." Danny's jaw clenched. "You know what Grace asked me yesterday?" She asked if Grandma and Grandpa were getting divorced like her friends' grandparents. "She's 3 years old, Dad. She shouldn't have to understand what divorce means." Robert felt physically ill. "Can I at least see your mother? Just for a few minutes?" "No. She's barely holding it together. Your presence would only make it worse." Danny stepped outside, closing the door behind him. They stood in the hallway, father and son, decades of love and respect evaporating in the fluorescent light. "Danny, you have to understand, I don't have to understand anything. You made a choice. Now live with the consequences." Danny's voice broke. "You were my hero. The hardest working man I knew. The guy who showed up, who kept promises, who taught me what integrity meant. And it was all bullshit." "It wasn't bullshit. I did work hard. I did provide. Providing money isn't the same as being present." Mom was present. She was at every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference while you worked late. And she never complained because she believed you were building something for all of us. But you weren't. You were building something for yourself. The words hit Robert like physical blows. "That's not fair. Isn't it? You're 62 years old, Dad. You're having a midlife crisis at 62. Do you know how pathetic that is?" Danny wiped his eyes roughly. "I have to go. My mother needs me." The parent who actually knows how to put family first. He went back inside, and the door closing felt like a coffin lid slamming shut. Robert returned to the hotel, where Jennifer was working remotely on her laptop. She looked up hopefully. "How did it go?" "Terrible. They won't talk to me." "Give it time," she said again, coming to embrace him. But her reassurances felt hollow now. The next weeks were a nightmare. Margaret hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Linda Morrison, who had a reputation for destroying cheating husbands in divorce court. Robert hired his own attorney, Jerry Steinberg, who'd handled corporate stuff for the firm but now had to navigate matrimonial law. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Margaret wanted everything: the condo, half the business, alimony, punitive damages for infidelity. New York was a no-fault divorce state. But Margaret's lawyer argued for fault-based grounds given the circumstances. "Your client destroyed a 35-year marriage for a woman young enough to be his daughter," Linda Morrison said coldly in a conference room in May. "My client gave up her career, raised his children, supported his business from nothing. She deserves to be compensated for that devotion." Jerry tried to negotiate, but Robert just wanted it over. He agreed to nearly everything. Margaret could have the condo. He'd pay generous alimony. He'd split the business assets. He just wanted to be free to start his new life. But freedom came at a price higher than money. Sarah refused to speak to him. When he called about her pregnancy, she hung up. When he tried to visit, Tom blocked him at the door. Sarah doesn't need this stress. She's having complications. The doctor says she needs to avoid emotional trauma. You've caused enough damage. The guilt was crushing. Robert hadn't even considered how his actions might affect Sarah's pregnancy. He sent gifts, letters, apologies. All returned unopened. Danny was slightly more civil, but only barely. He agreed to meet Robert for coffee in June, but it was a disaster. The girls ask about you, Danny said, stirring his coffee without drinking. Emily especially. She doesn't understand why Grandpa doesn't visit anymore. I want to see them. I miss them terribly. Well, that's complicated now, isn't it? Because explaining why Grandma and Grandpa don't live together anymore means explaining that Grandpa left Grandma for a woman closer to my age than his. How do I explain that to a 7-year-old? Robert had no answer. You know what the worst part is? Danny continued. I'm afraid to trust my own marriage now. I look at Karen and wonder if one day, 20 or 30 years from now, I'll get bored and throw it all away. Because if you could do it, you, the most committed person I knew, then anyone can. Danny, please don't what? Don't lose faith in marriage. Don't question everything you taught me. Sorry, Dad. Too late. Michael stopped by Robert's office in July unannounced. He looked thin, tired. He'd broken off his engagement to Elena. Why? Robert asked, shocked. Because I couldn't do it. I kept thinking about you and Mom, and I couldn't promise forever when forever apparently means nothing. Michael's voice was flat, emotionless. Elena deserves better than someone who'll maybe leave her in 30 years for a younger model. Michael, that's not your relationship with Elena has nothing to do with my marriage to your mother. Doesn't it? You taught me everything I know about relationships. About commitment. About what marriage means. And it was all a lie. It wasn't a lie. I loved your mother. I still care about her. But not enough. Michael looked at him with something like pity. You know what Mom said? She said she'd rather you had died. At least then she could have mourned you with dignity, but this is a different kind of death. The death of who she thought you were. Robert had no words. Michael left without saying goodbye. Through it all, Jennifer stayed supportive. They moved into an apartment together in August, a 1-bedroom in the Upper East Side with a doorman and a view of Central Park. It should have been exciting, romantic, the beginning of their new. But Robert couldn't shake the darkness. He'd call Margaret's number sometimes, late at night, just to hear her voicemail. Hi, you've reached Margaret. Leave a message. He never left one. What could he say that hadn't already been said? The business suffered. Clients noticed the tension, the distraction. Robert had always prided himself on professionalism, but now he was missing meetings, forgetting details, making uncharacteristic mistakes. Several longtime clients quietly moved to other firms. Frank Delaney, who'd warned Robert at the Christmas party, stopped by the office in September. I told you not to be stupid, Frank said, sitting across from Robert's desk. You didn't listen. I appreciate the I told you so, Frank. I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to tell you I'm taking my business elsewhere. I've been with you 20 years, Bobby. But I can't trust a man who'd blow up his whole life for a piece of ass. It's not like that. Jennifer and I don't care. You destroyed a good woman who stood by you for decades. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Frank stood. Good luck with your young girlfriend. Hope she's worth what it cost you. He left, and Robert knew others would follow. His reputation, carefully built over 30 years, was crumbling. Jennifer tried to cheer him up. She planned date nights, weekend getaways, talked about their future. But Robert felt like he was underwater, everything muffled and distant. He'd wake up at night in their expensive apartment, Jennifer beside him, and feel overwhelming panic. What had he done? What had he done? In October, Sarah gave birth to a son. Margaret called Danny to tell him. Danny called Michael. Nobody called Robert. He found out through a Facebook post. He wasn't supposed to see Danny had blocked him, but a mutual business contact congratulated him in the comments. Robert stared at the picture, Sarah in a hospital bed, holding a tiny baby, Margaret beside her with tears of joy, Tom beaming, Danny and his family crowded around. Michael taking the photo. A family celebration. Without him. Robert tried calling, blocked. He sent gifts to the hospital, returned. He showed up at Sarah's house in New Jersey. Tom threatened to call the police. "You have a grandson," Robert said desperately through the closed door. "His name is James. Sarah named him after her grandfather, my father." "Doesn't that mean something?" "It means she wanted to honor a man of integrity," Tom called back. "That's not you." Robert drove back to Manhattan, pulled over on the side of the highway, and cried until his throat was raw. Jennifer found him that night, sitting in the dark apartment, a bottle of scotch half empty beside him. "Robert, you're scaring me. I've lost everything," he said. "My children won't speak to me. My grandchildren will grow up not knowing me. My business is failing. And Margaret." He couldn't finish. "You have me," Jennifer said softly. "We have each other. We can build something new." But Robert looked at her beautiful, young, loving Jennifer and felt nothing but regret. Not regret that he was with her, but regret that he'd destroyed everything else to be with her. The price was too high. The cost was his entire legacy. "I need to fix this," he whispered. "How?" "They won't talk to you." "I don't know. But I have to try." November came, marking 1 year since the affair had begun. Robert wrote letters to each of his children, long, detailed apologies explaining his mistakes, his regrets, his desperate wish to make things right. He didn't excuse his behavior. He didn't blame anyone. He simply took responsibility and begged for forgiveness. Danny responded with a single line, "Forgiveness takes time." "I'm not there yet." Sarah didn't respond at all. Michael sent back the letter unopened with a note, "Actions speak louder than words. Show us you've changed. Then maybe we'll talk." But how could he show them? He was with Jennifer. He divorced their mother. The damage was done. In December, Robert saw Margaret for the first time since April. By accident at a grocery store in Forest Hills. She was thinner, her hair completely silver now, wearing a coat he'd bought her 3 Christmases ago. She didn't see him. He watched her pick through apples, methodical and sad, and felt like his heart was being crushed. He left without approaching her. What right did he have? The year ended the way it had begun with Christmas. But this year Robert spent it alone. Jennifer had gone to visit her parents in California, thinking he needed space. She was probably right. He sat in the empty apartment, watching snow fall over Central Park, thinking about last Christmas. The turkey, the laughter, the grandchildren running through the condo. Margaret's apple pie. Danny's toast to family. Sarah's secret she was waiting to share. Michael's shy mention of Elena. All of it gone. All of it destroyed by his choices. Robert poured a glass of scotch, raised it to the empty room, and whispered, "Merry Christmas." Nobody answered. January 2025 arrived with brutal cold. New York was buried under snow, the city grinding to a halt during a blizzard that paralyzed transportation and left everyone trapped inside. Robert stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Upper East Side apartment, watching the white silence outside, feeling it mirror the isolation inside. Jennifer was still in California. What was supposed to be a 1-week Christmas visit had stretched into 3 weeks. She called daily, but the conversations were strained. She talked about sunshine and family dinners while Robert sat in darkness. The distance between them wasn't just geographical anymore. The divorce was finalized on January 15th. Margaret got the condo, a substantial cash settlement, and alimony that would continue until she remarried, which, given how she felt about marriage now, would be never. Robert signed everything without fighting. His lawyer thought he was insane. "You're giving away millions," Jerry Steinberg said. "She's entitled to half, sure, but not this much. Fight it, no." Robert's voice was flat. "She earned every penny. 35 years. She earned it." Margaret took the money and did something Robert never expected. She bought a small house in Woodside, Queens, near St. Sebastian's Church, where they'd gotten married. She returned to the neighborhood where they'd begun, like she was trying to go back to a time before everything went wrong. Robert heard this from Danny, who'd started responding to texts occasionally. Not warmly, but at least responding. It was progress, however slight. "Mom seems better," Danny wrote in February. She joined a grief support group. She's painting more. Sarah visits her every week with the baby. She's finding her way. Robert was glad Margaret was healing. He truly was. But the knowledge that she was doing it without him, that his children were supporting her through pain he'd caused, was agonizing. In March, Jennifer returned from California with news that shattered what little remained of Robert's composure. I got a job offer, she said, sitting across from him at their kitchen table. In San Francisco. Head of operations for a startup. It's an incredible opportunity. Robert's chest tightened. When? I'd start in May. But Robert. She reached for his hand. I think you should come with me. Fresh start, away from all this history. We could get married, have children, build the life we talked about. Robert looked at her, 29 now, brilliant and beautiful, her whole life ahead of her. And he looked at himself, 63, estranged from his children, drowning in regret, held together by guilt and stubbornness. I can't leave New York, he said quietly. My kids are here. My grandchildren. If there's any chance of rebuilding those relationships, I have to stay. Are you choosing them over me? Jennifer's voice cracked. After everything we've been through? I'm choosing to face what I've done instead of running from it. They argued for hours. Jennifer cried, accused him of never truly committing to her, of using her as an escape from a marriage he was too cowardly to fix properly. Robert couldn't defend himself because parts of what she said were true. Did you ever really love me? Jennifer asked, mascara streaking her face. Or was I just a fantasy? A midlife crisis you could blame for destroying your perfect life. I do love you. I do love you. But even as Robert said it, he wasn't sure anymore. What he felt for Jennifer was tangled with so much shame and loss that he couldn't separate the emotions. Jennifer left for San Francisco in April. They didn't officially break up, but they both knew it was over. She took most of her belongings, leaving Robert in an apartment that felt cavernous and empty. On her last night, she kissed him goodbye. I hope you find peace, she said. I really do. But I can't wait around while you punish yourself forever. After she left, Robert sat on the couch they'd picked out together, in the apartment they'd furnished with hope, and realized he'd lost her too. The woman he'd destroyed his marriage for, the woman he'd chosen over his family, was gone. And he was completely alone. The next months passed in gray monotony. Robert went to the office, managed the dwindling client list, came home to emptiness. He didn't date. He barely ate. He existed, but he didn't live. In June, he received an unexpected call from Michael. Dad, it's me. Robert nearly dropped the phone. Double quotes Michael. Hi. It's good to hear your voice, yeah. Listen, I'm getting coffee near your office tomorrow. 1 o'clock at that place on Lexington. If you want to join me. It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was something. Robert arrived 15 minutes early, heart pounding. When Michael walked in, Robert was struck by how much older his son looked. 25 now, no longer a boy. They sat across from each other, awkward and careful. How have you been? Robert asked. Better. I've been in therapy. Dealing with everything. Michael stirred his coffee. Elena and I got back together. We're taking it slow, but we're trying. That's wonderful. I'm happy for you. Are you? Michael looked up, his eyes searching Robert's face. Are you happy, Dad? Was it worth it? The question hung between them. Robert could have lied. Could have said yes, he'd found true love, he had no regrets. But he was tired of lying. No, he said simply. It wasn't worth it. Not even close. Michael nodded slowly. Jennifer gone. San Francisco. We ended it in April. So you destroyed your marriage, lost your family, and ended up alone anyway, yes. Michael leaned back, studying his father. Why did you do it, really? Was Mom that terrible? Were you that unhappy? Your mother was never terrible. She was perfect. That was almost the problem. She was everything a wife should be, and I took her completely for granted. Robert's voice broke. I felt invisible. Old. Irrelevant. And Jennifer made me feel seen. Special. Alive again. It was selfish and stupid, and I threw away everything that mattered for a feeling that didn't last. Do you love Mom? I never stopped loving her. I just forgot how to appreciate her. Michael was quiet for a long moment. She's dating someone. Did Danny tell you? Robert felt like he'd been stabbed. No. He didn't. Guy named Patrick. Irish like her family. He's a widower, lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago. He's kinda her patient. He doesn't take her for granted. The jealousy was irrational but overwhelming. Another man holding Margaret, making her laugh, being the partner Robert had failed to be. Another man getting the second chance Robert would never have. Is she happy? Robert forced himself to ask. Getting there. It's still early. But yeah, she smiles more now. She's not just surviving anymore. She's living. Robert should have been glad. He wanted Margaret to be happy. but hearing it hurt more than he'd imagined possible. I'm glad he lied. Then, more truthfully, I want her to be happy. She deserves that. She does. Michael finished his coffee. Look, Dad, I'm not ready to have you back in my life fully. None of us are. But Elena convinced me that holding onto anger was only hurting me. So I'm here. This doesn't mean everything's forgiven. It just means I'm willing to try. That's more than I deserve, yet it is. Michael stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. Sarah's having another baby. Due in October. And she said if you've truly changed, if you can prove you're different, she might let you meet James. Supervised visits. Baby steps. Hope flared in Robert's chest for the first time in over a year. Really? Don't screw it up. She's giving you one chance. Michael left without saying goodbye, but the door wasn't slammed this time. Just closed out gently. Robert threw himself into change. He started therapy with a psychologist in Murray Hill, a woman named Dr. Rivera who specialized in late-life crises. He attended a men's support group for divorced fathers. He volunteered at a food bank in Queens every Saturday, trying to rebuild some sense of purpose beyond work. The business stabilized. Robert hired a new assistant, a 55-year-old woman named Patricia, who was professional, competent, and completely uninteresting to him romantically. He implemented clear boundaries between work and personal life. He left the office at 5:30 every day, even when there was more to do. In August, Sarah agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a park in New Jersey, with playgrounds and walking paths. She brought James, who was 10 months old now, chubby-cheeked and curious. Robert's grandson. A stranger to him. Sarah sat on a bench, holding James protectively, while Robert sat 3 feet away, careful not to crowd them. Thank you for this, Robert said. For giving me a chance. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for James. He should know his grandfather, even if that grandfather is flawed. I am flawed. Deeply flawed. And I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so profoundly sorry for what I put you and your mother through. Sarah's jaw tightened. You didn't just hurt Mom. You hurt all of us. You shattered our image of marriage, of family, of what commitment means. Danny questions his relationship constantly now. Michael broke off his engagement, and me? Her voice cracked. I have nightmares that Tom will do to me what you did to Mom. That I'll give him my whole life and it won't be enough. Tom loves you. He's nothing like me. That's what Mom thought about you. The words cut deep because they were true. Robert had been a good husband for 34 years. It only took 1 year to destroy everything. They sat in silence, watching James try to grab at leaves blowing past. Robert ached to hold his grandson, but he didn't ask. He had no right. Can I tell you something? Sarah said finally. Something I've never told anyone except Tom? Of course. There was a moment after I found out about Jennifer, when I hated you so much I wished you were dead. I actually wished it. And then I felt guilty for wishing it, which made me hate you more. Tears rolled down her face. You were my hero, Dad. You taught me to ride a bike. You scared away boys who weren't good enough. You walked me down the aisle. And you threw all of that away for someone my age. How am I supposed to process that? Robert had no answer. There was no answer. I can't undo what I did. I can only promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be better. Better for who? Mom's moved on. We've all moved on. The family you destroyed isn't coming back. I know. But maybe I can be part of whatever new version exists. Even if it's just on the edges. Even if I'm not the center anymore. Sarah looked at him for a long time. James, she said finally, turning to her son. This is your grandpa, Robert. Can you wave? James stared at Robert with big brown eyes, then buried his face in Sarah's shoulder, shy. It was such a small moment, but to Robert it was everything. Baby steps, Sarah said, echoing Michael's words. Supervised visits. You earn trust back slowly. 1 moment at a time. I'll take whatever you're willing to give. They sat together for another hour, carefully rebuilding the tiniest bridge across a chasm Robert had created. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something. September brought a surprise invitation. Danny asked Robert to attend Grace's 4th birthday party. Not as an honored guest, but as a tolerated presence. Robert drove to Boston, staying in a hotel rather than presuming to stay at Danny's house, and showed up to the party with carefully chosen gifts. Grace didn't remember him well. She'd been 3 when everything fell apart. But Emily, now 8, did remember. She looked at Robert with wariness, standing close to her mother, Karen, who was polite but distant. "Hi, Grandpa," Emily said carefully. "Hi, sweetheart. You've gotten so tall. I'm in 3rd grade now. I got A's on my report card." "That's wonderful. I'm very proud of you. Are you going to leave again?" The question was innocent but devastating. Robert knelt down to her level. "I made some very bad mistakes, Emily. I hurt people I love. I'm trying to fix those mistakes, but it takes time. I promise I'm going to try my very hardest to be the grandfather you deserve." Emily considered this, then surprised him by hugging him quickly before running off to play with Grace. It was brief, tentative, but it was contact. Robert's eyes burned with tears he fought to control. Danny pulled him aside later, in the kitchen while the kids ate cake in the living room. "Karen almost didn't let you come," Danny said quietly. "She thinks you'll hurt them the way you hurt Mom." "I understand. I would think the same thing. I told her everyone deserves a second chance." "But Dad," Danny looked him directly in the eyes. "You don't get a 3rd chance. You screw this up, you're done. Forever." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because I've spent the last year and a half watching my mother rebuild her life from rubble. She's stronger now, but she'll never fully trust anyone again. You did that. You broke something in her that can't be fixed." The guilt was crushing, but Robert accepted it. "How is she really?" "She's okay. Patrick is good to her. He's patient with her walls. But she's different now, harder. More cynical. The woman who believed in fairy tale love and forever marriages? She's gone. You killed her." Robert had no defense. "I live with that knowledge every day." "Good. You should." Danny's voice was harsh, but his eyes were sad. "I loved who you used to be, Dad. I'm trying to accept who you are now. But I'm not sure I'll ever fully forgive you. I don't expect you to." They rejoined the party, and Robert stayed on the periphery, watching his son with his family, his granddaughters playing, the life continuing without him at the center. He was an outsider now, allowed to observe but not truly belong. In October, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Emma. This time, Robert was notified not by Sarah, but by Michael, who texted a picture. Emma Rose, born October 12th. 7 pounds 3 ounces. Everyone healthy. Robert stared at the photo of his granddaughter, tears streaming down his face in his empty apartment. Another grandchild he might never hold. Another milestone he'd missed because of choices made in a moment of weakness that lasted months. He sent flowers to the hospital with a card, "Congratulations. I'm so happy for your growing family. Love, Dad." Not love, Grandpa, because he hadn't earned that title with Emma yet. Sarah sent a brief text 2 weeks later, "Thank you for the flowers. They were lovely." It wasn't much, but it was something. The holidays approached Robert's 2nd Christmas alone. But this year, Michael invited him for dinner on December 27th. Not Christmas Day itself, which would be spent with Margaret and the rest of the family, but a separate, smaller gathering. "Just me and Elena," Michael said, low-key. "But if you want to come." Robert came. He brought wine and stories and humility. He met Elena properly for the first time, apologized for his past behavior affecting their relationship, and congratulated them on their renewed engagement. "Your son is lucky to have you," Robert told Elena. "You're clearly good for each other." "We're working on it," Elena said diplomatically. "One day at a time." Over dinner, Michael asked about Jennifer. "Have you heard from her?" "No. Last I knew, she was engaged to someone in California. Tech entrepreneur. Good for her. Do you regret it? Ending things with her?" Robert thought carefully before answering. "I regret how it started. I regret the pain it caused. But ending it, no. It was the first honest thing I'd done in over a year. She deserved someone who chose her first, not someone drowning in guilt and regret. And Mom, your mother deserves to be happy with someone who appreciates her. I hope Patrick does." "He does," Michael said. "He proposed." She said yes. The knife twisted deeper. Margaret was remarrying. Moving on completely. The door was closed forever when Robert managed to ask, "Spring." Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. "I'm happy for her," Robert said, and meant it, even though it hurt more than anything had hurt before. As the year ended, Robert took stock of his life. He was 63 years old, divorced, alone. Estranged from his children, though slowly rebuilding fragile connections. Permanently separated from his grandchildren's daily lives. His business was smaller, his reputation damaged, his savings depleted by the divorce settlement. He'd traded 35 years of marriage, a loving family, and the respect of his community for an affair that lasted less than 2 years and ended in isolation. Was it worth it? The question Jennifer had asked. The question Michael had asked. The question Robert asked himself every single day. No. 1,000 times no. But the tragedy wasn't just that it wasn't worth it. The tragedy was that Robert couldn't undo it. He couldn't go back to that evening in September 2023 when Jennifer brought wine to his office and make a different choice. He couldn't reclaim Margaret's trust. He couldn't erase his children's pain. He couldn't unsee the devastation in his wife's eyes when she discovered his betrayal. Some choices are irreversible. Some damage cannot be repaired. And some men spend the rest of their lives haunted by the moment they threw away everything that mattered for something that didn't. Robert Callahan was one of those men. He stood at his apartment window on New Year's Eve, watching fireworks over Central Park, the city celebrating while he mourned. Somewhere in Queens, Margaret was probably watching the same fireworks with Patrick, planning a wedding, looking toward a future that didn't include Robert. Somewhere in Boston, Danny was with his family. In New Jersey, Sarah held her babies. In Brooklyn, Michael laughed with Elena. Life went on. The family adapted, reformed, continued. Just without him at the center. Robert raised a glass of scotch to the empty room, to all the ghosts of chances he'd destroyed, to the man he used to be and the wreckage of the man he'd become. Happy New Year, he whispered to no one. Outside, the fireworks continued, beautiful and bright and ultimately temporary, just like everything he'd thrown away.